I am Rachelle Gould, an assistant professor at the Rubenstein School. And I'd like to start by asking you a question. Why are you here today? No, really, why are you here? There's probably an approximate reason that comes to mind, maybe meeting new people, hearing about some interesting research. But I would guess, if we dig a little deeper, that the reason you're here is related to the fact that these pictures that I'm showing you make you feel good. They calm you down. They remind you to take a deep breath. If you're like a lot of people, they even increase your cognitive function. So ecosystems enrich our lives and they increase our well-being. These benefits can be called non-material benefits, that ecosystems benefit us in non-material ways. You can also call these cultural ecosystem services. And my research goal is to understand and characterize how the non-material benefits of ecosystems work and to bring them into policy. I want to emphasize here this non-material piece. So this is benefits like spirituality, psychological value, heritage, and identity. The project that I'm going to talk about for a couple minutes is to characterize how the cultural services research is connecting with decision making. So I'm doing a review of the academic literature on cultural services, about 120 articles. And my presentation of this involves both stories and numbers related to these articles. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. So this is a river in Jakarta, Indonesia. As you can see, people live near the river, their lives and work are intertwined with the river. The river floods pretty often, causing a lot of damage. So the government is considering concretizing and channelizing the river to deal with the flooding. They're treating it as an engineering and infrastructure problem. Some researchers from Conservation International asked what would happen if we thought about the river as an ecological system. So they considered what would be the cultural services associated with two different scenarios: treating the river as an ecological system and the problem of flooding as an ecological problem, or treating it on the right as an infrastructure problem and an infrastructural system. So they started by asking residents what they would be willing to pay to see a difference here. And it turns out that residents, even residents in relative poverty, were willing to pay an amount added to their weekly community fee. Then the researchers used focus groups, choice experiments, and interviews to figure out what exactly people were willing to pay for. It turns out most of what they were willing to pay for was a variety of cultural ecosystem services. So this decision is still in the works, but these cultural services data are part of the discussion about what should happen with this area. So now, just a few numbers. So I'm going to show you a chart, and on the y-axis is going to be the number of articles in my sample, and on the x-axis, the connections between research and decision-making that are discussed in those articles. So about a quarter of them say nothing at all about decision-making. Roughly half say this could be relevant in general, absolutely no specifics. A handful say we need to include cultural services, or say general things. Only about 10% actually talk about a specific context for a decision, like the example I just gave. So my work, one part of my work, is delving into what's going on here. What are some patterns around when this work is connected to decisions and when it's not? My research looks at the question of how do we incorporate something so difficult to measure, but so important into decision making. The most common question that I get is, that's great, these are really important values, but how do you measure that? So that's what I work on, and if you're interested in that question, please come talk to me. Thank you.